Hey there, I'm Sarah McLaughlin. Thanks for joining me on the Chaos to Calm podcast, a podcast designed for women over 40 who think that changing hormones might be messing with their mood, metabolism, and energy, and want to change that in a healthy, sustainable, and permanent way. Each episode will explore topics related to health and wellness for women in their 40s, like what the heck is happening to your hormones, what to do about it with nutrition, lifestyle, and stress management, and inspiring conversations with guests sharing their insights and tips on how to live your best life in your 40s and beyond. So if you're feeling like you're in the midst of a hormonal storm and don't want perimenopause to be horrific, then join me on Chaos to Calm as I share with you how to make it to menopause without it wrecking your relationships and life. Hello and welcome to episode 22 of Chaos to Calm podcast. I'm so excited today to be welcoming Luanne Hopkinson, our Low Histamine Nutritionist, to the program. We are going to be deep diving into histamine intolerance and how it might be impacting your perimenopause experience. And we're also talking about neuroplasticity and neuroscience. So let's dive straight in. Luanne, thanks for joining me today. I'm so excited to talk to you about all things gut and histamine intolerance, which is something that I think lots of women over 40 are definitely struggling with, but might not understand what's going on. So before we jump into the nitty-gritty of what histamine intolerance is, can you explain a little bit about what histamine intolerance is, why it's relevant for women over 40 and moving into perimenopause? And feel free to give us a bit of a snippet around your personal journey and health challenges and how that led you to be a histamine intolerance nutritionist.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm so happy to be here. Histamine intolerance is a funny one. It's really complex in its presentation of symptoms, and it can be really confusing. And sometimes people just don't know if they've got it or they think they might have it. And it mostly shows up as kind of allergic type symptoms. So things like a skin rash, constant sinus congestion, or maybe runny nose, and also things that you wouldn't think as well, like headaches, migraines, joint pain, fatigue. You can see so many different ranges of digestive issues. You get a lot of reflux and heartburn, but you can also see bloating, constipation, or diarrhea. Can go either way.
Yep.
And what we would think of is kind of like the perimenopause hot flushes, but usually with histamine intolerance, it's very much at night. It's usually overnight heat where you wake up and feel like your pillow is boiling hot. And you can just always get this at night between, say, 3 and 4 or 5 a.m. And those are all signs of histamine intolerance. We also see red flushing on the face, and itching, and some respiratory, breathing type connection. People often have asthma as well, and lots of other what we would call comorbidities or other issues alongside. So alongside histamine intolerance, I see a lot of hormonal issues with perimenopause, and also thyroid issues, allergy, true IgE allergies, and stress and anxiety and depression. So a lot of people are struggling with sleep as well, sleep and mood.
Yeah, there's lots going on, isn't there? And I think the takeaway is that it can be different for everyone. So maybe 2 people is not going to look the same. I kind of think of it as we all have our nurture points or those tendencies to develop things in an area. For me, it's always allergies and intolerances. That's my body's thing. But I just wanted to touch on as well, like histamine itself. So it's not necessarily a baddie in our bodies, but something that, is beneficial for us in some way. So can you help us understand why some people are fine with histamine in their, and it's the things that it's doing, but other people might not be?
Yeah, histamine itself is a neurotransmitter. It's really important in the sleep-wake cycle. It's important for drive and motivation, and it's naturally present in our food. And for 90% of the people out there, it's not a problem. Like, most of us will have eaten these foods our whole lives, particularly things like fermented foods and alcohols, vinegars, and also some vegetables and aged meats and cheeses. And we often find that we might be eating these things fine, and that at a certain point in our life, it becomes a problem. And I see it more so in women over 40, because when we're getting to that age, we're also having the hormones come in as well. So it really means that there's more going on. And the basics of histamine intolerance really boils down to a lack of an enzyme in the gut called DAO, and that breaks down the histamine in our food. So if we don't have that DAO enzyme breaking down the histamine in our food, then it gets into the rest of our body. Then we have the issue with an HNMT enzyme in our liver. So our liver does our detoxification, and that enzyme often is not functioning super great. And our liver is basically trying to process all of this histamine that's coming through, that's normally all digested up in the gut. So the actual issue of histamine intolerance isn't really an intolerance to a food or to histamine foods in general, but it's an excess of histamine in the body, because we're not detoxifying the histamine as we normally would. And so the histamine is connecting to the histamine receptors that are on all the cells all over our body. And that's when we're seeing things like itchy, watery eyes pop up, or a rash, or sneezing, or all of these other kinds of things that we've talked about. So yeah, histamine intolerance itself is fairly simple when you look at the basics of it, but it can be caused by many different things. Mm-hmm. Now, on the continuum is also something called mast cell activation syndrome, and at its far reaches is mast cells that are overreacting to everything and spitting out histamine, as well as other inflammatory mediators. I imagine these like a little puffball mushroom, and you tap them and they poof out, and all the little bits come out and they flood your body. Yeah. And so I find people often have histamine intolerance plus a tiny bit of mast cell activation, varying up to a huge amount of mast cell activation, and all that sort of levels in between. So usually there's a bit of both involved. And, myself, I had both. Yeah. And, you asked a little bit about my story, and I think it's a familiar one for a lot of people, where you're okay all the way through your youth. You have a fun life, you eat food, you might have had the odd issue here and there, maybe a bit of IBS, which is what I had, and I had a little bit of anxiety, but I was generally okay. But then at 41, I had some exposure to some mold. I also found I had some heavy metals in my body, and I had chronic fatigue, I had fibromyalgia, and I did some treatment for that, and it actually made me worse. Yeah. So I actually reacted to the medication I was taking for the heavy metals, and I ended up with my foods then going, okay, I'm having a problem now with all of these foods. Before, I was gluten-free, I ate paleo, I was pretty healthy, I was, studying to be a nutritionist at the time. I was doing all these things. And then boom, I got hit with this reaction. And I find with my clients, some of them have a reaction to something, but others, it's just gradual. There's no specific reaction. It's more of a general thing. But either way, we can look at it in the same way, and we can treat it in the same way. And for me, I ended up so bad that I was reacting to every kind of medication, every kind of supplement, anything I took, because I had the pretty much full-blown mast cell activation syndrome after that reaction. Yeah. I ended up in hospital with anaphylaxis. Gosh. I ended up down to 5 foods. Yeah. And I couldn't leave the house because of the pollen. and there's a lot of pollen in Melbourne.
Yes, and the plane trees are often a problem. I don't know if you live, you're in an area, I think, where they are.
Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned mold, because I also had a mold trigger that in my early 40s, probably same age, triggered a whole raft of allergies, developing intolerances, IBS. And I think that we're probably not alone in that. Maybe some people do it not as extreme as you or me. But I haven't met a naturopath or nutritionist yet that doesn't have a great complex health story behind them. I think that's helps make us great, doesn't it?
I think, it gives us so much empathy because we know what it's like.
Yeah, we really know. Like when you're down to 5 foods, you must have so much empathy for your clients, and hopefully they're not at that point before they come to you. But feeling worried about eating anything, this is something that women say to me often, is I just don't know how I'm going to react to a particular food. I need to know where the toilets are when I go out, because I might have to rush there afterwards. And I always think of histamine when they start talking to me about that, more so than perimenopause things. But I suppose they're interconnected, aren't they? Like
they are, because our liver is filtering out our hormones as well as histamine. So if our liver's like this little highway and you can only get so many cars onto it at a time, and say there's roadworks on your highway, because you've got certain things that are slowing things down, like stress or maybe some mold exposure and stuff like that, you're going to have all the cars backed up. And so your estrogen bus is sitting behind your histamine truck, and they're all waiting to go out. And then your body becomes more full of all these partially processed metabolites and what go from natural and useful to toxic and not helpful. And we need to improve that part of our body that's processing all of that stuff.
I love that analogy. That's awesome. It's really great for visual people as well. You can just think about what's happening in your body there, and that they're back in circulation, or circling around like the planes at the airport when they can't land, It
is.
Dumping fuel, dumping histamine all over your body there as well.
Yeah.
So what would you suggest, Lou? Because, you really are like a bridge, I suppose, between Western medicine, or, the usual way, I suppose, that people go, and natural therapies as well, or conventional and holistic medicine there. And, having that holistic view is so helpful when people have multiple things going on, like you've described for yourself there. But how can someone work out if histamine intolerance is a problem for them? You did mention some symptoms and triggers before, and, especially for women over 40, they might often get overlooked, or just say, flushing sweats. Oh, it's probably perimenopause because you're X number of years old.
Have some hormone therapy,
Yeah. Or, go on the pill, or have a Mirena, or take an antidepressant. That's the, the top 5, the usual. So what would you suggest for someone if they were like, well, maybe they have talked to their GP and thinking, I think intuitively we know whether when there is something wrong in our bodies, or if the answer that we're given in the treatment is not working, well, we can feel, a lot of women feel stranded or not know where to look. So what would you suggest for them? How can they work out within, at home, and think, well, maybe actually I need to look into histamine intolerance?
So the most important thing to understand is there is no diagnostic criteria for histamine intolerance. So it's not recognised by the CDC, by the Australian medical boards and associations here. GPs don't generally know what it is, because it's not something that you can easily test for, right? It's really important to know that there's no single test you can do to go, oh yeah, I've got histamine intolerance. And a lot of people do ask me, can I test for this? And yeah, you can test to see if you've got high histamine in your blood, but that doesn't actually tell you what's going on or any detail. The easiest way to see if you have histamine intolerance is to do a 4-week low histamine diet.
Great.
That's the easiest way. It's the gold standard test, actually.
Ah, that's awesome. You have a download people can access from your website on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll pop that link in the show notes for everyone.
Yeah, I have a free food list and I have a 4-week meal plan. And you can basically do the 4-week meal plan. If you feel better, you know you have excess amounts of histamine in your body. So that's the first step.
Yep.
Don't stay on the diet forever, though, please.
Yeah.
I know some people do.
Yeah.
But that's how you know. Now, if you have mast cell activation syndrome and you do the low histamine diet and you get a little bit of improvement, but not a lot, that's when I go, okay, yeah, we're looking more at mast cell activation syndrome, because the mast cells will create an association with other foods. And so they'll trigger off, and they'll also be triggering off due to other toxins and bacteria and things that are happening in the gut, and stress.
Yeah, such a big trigger.
And that's when there is a diagnostic criteria, but unfortunately there are 2 different diagnostic criteria, and they're actually very hard to satisfy.
Okay.
So there are a lot of people who are on that continuum who really, if you do go to an immunologist, they'll test you for things, something like tryptase, which is a common one that gets tested for. But our mast cells may not be producing tryptase, but they may still be producing histamine and other things. Yeah. So, you can, if you're in that really bad state, you can go and see an immunologist. I know in Australia it's an 8-month wait for most of them.
Yeah, I tried to book into a new allergist since I moved states, and I had to actually wait 9 months. So luckily for me, my symptoms are mostly under control. But yeah, it can be long and painful. And I was wondering, just while you were talking, Lou, for a lot of people, they might start eliminating things or cutting stuff out to reduce their symptoms. So then by the time you do get to an immunologist and they're testing, would it be possible that maybe the immune system's calmed a bit, or there's a little bit of relief that might alter any blood tests or measurement that they might do?
Yeah, like if they're going to do tests, they want you to be in a flare.
Yeah, no one's really keen to do that.
You actually have to be feeling bad to go and get the test. And look, I was in hospital with anaphylaxis. I had an EpiPen, not for an IgE allergy, because the mast cells were just producing so much histamines, and I needed to have this, and I needed to take lots of medication as well as supplementation. So I, as far as I'm concerned, we sometimes have to take medication. There are definitely some times where we have to take antihistamines or mast cell stabilizers.
Yeah, great.
And it's great when we can wean off slowly and move over onto natural supplements and then nothing. But, I still didn't have tryptase in my test.
Wow.
And my immunologist still said, you've got mast cell activation syndrome. Like
that's good.
Still, the good ones, they diagnose based on the symptom picture, and they don't rely on one single test, because as we know, one single test is never the...
Well, and, it would invariably vary between different moments of the day or even days of the week. Yeah.
Tryptase is up and down, just the same as all of our other hormones. And histamine naturally rises in the evening, which is also why we have more symptoms in the evening, as well as the fact that we eat during the day, so we have more symptoms during the day.
The load builds up.
Yeah, because eating is inflammatory, just eating. But normally we're not so sensitive, so it's not a problem that eating is inflammatory. We just ride through it. Our body knows how to deal with it all. But when we get in a state of this chronic inflammation, chronic issues happening underneath the hood that are causing the histamine intolerance, that's what we've got to look at. And the biggest thing we need to do when we have histamine intolerance or mast cell activation is ask why.
Yes.
And a lot of times people just go, well, that's my label.
Yes.
Same with fibromyalgia, same with chronic fatigue. That's
IBS,
my label.
FODMAP, like a low FODMAP. Yeah.
All those is a symptom. So I'm low FODMAP diet. I've got SIBO. That's a symptom. They're all symptoms of what is going on underneath. Why?
I think that's the great thing with naturopathy, isn't it? We have the opportunity, we have the time to spend with our clients, but we also have been taught to be like those detectives of natural health and find out what's underlying it, what's driving it. Like, yes, we know what's happening, what the end result is, that your histamine is over, your body can't deal with what's there. but why? It's such a great question. I think it's the big difference between how we work and others. So I also, you talked a little bit about your journey before, and we didn't get to the bit where you really sort of up-leveled your healing or really recovered using neuroscience and neuroplasticity techniques. And I'm really interested to learn more about that, because I don't know much about the way or those skills that you have. But yeah, can you tell us a bit more about those particularly neuroplasticity and neuroscience techniques that you use to help your clients with their histamine metabolism and recovering from MCAS or histamine intolerance?
So I used something called self-directed neuroplasticity, otherwise known as brain retraining. There's also lots of different people who teach it in different ways and forms and give it different names. But basically, it's about training our nervous system to reduce its hypersensitivity, its high alert. Because what happens is, when we're chronically ill for a long time, and if we're chronically stressed for a long time, our brain shifts. And it shifts in such a way that instead of what we would call self-regulation, which means we move from a rest and digest parasympathetic mode to a sympathetic mobilization, get going, moving mode, and we go into that fight, flight, and we naturally shift, our nervous system gets stuck. It's actually stuck, but it becomes this normalized feeling. So we don't realize we're kind of as stressed or whatever, or we're not even feeling stressed, but the trauma from past events gets stored in the body. And it could be as simple as car accidents, or it could be as complex as an abusive family or something like that. It can be as simple as a toxic boss for 10 years that can cause that chronic change in the brain. So what we're doing is we're actually rewiring our brain, rewiring our nervous system, and that's rewiring our immune system's overreaction to the environment, which includes food and bacteria and all of those things. So it's really interesting to know there's so much stuff going on under the hood that's subconscious that we feel like we don't really have control over, but indirectly we do. And it wasn't until I started doing this that I realized how much I was thinking about food, and how much I was thinking about how I couldn't eat food. And how much I was thinking about my symptoms and worrying about my symptoms. And so when I'm working with clients, food fear and symptom fear is a huge part of what we work on. And once we're able to shift that, we can really shift our nervous system and we can really reduce reactivity. And I use multiple tools that I used to help me and that I then trained in as I went along. So, you know, there's the basic brain retraining. I also trained in something called MAP coaching, which is a way of rewiring our subconscious as well. This works on a slightly higher level because we're working more with our emotions and our thoughts and our beliefs about past or present circumstances, and we're actually neutralizing those emotions so that when we do think of that event, it doesn't cause us any kind of pain. So it's like the next level. The brain retraining is very much like poking at the brain with a stick, and then the next level is kind of like talking to the brain in a different way. And then I also, you know, use NLP, hypnotherapy, meditation, all of those kinds of tools, vagus nerve tools as well, to actually help tone our vagus nerve. That's
my favorite, singing or humming.
Singing, humming, gargling. And just there's so many more. And because, you know, if our vagus nerve is connected to all of our organs in our body, and our brain is telling our body that it needs to run from a tiger, it'll use that vagus nerve to say, well, we don't need the organs right now, so let's just deprioritize all of those and let's focus on our muscles. And then you get that coat hanger tension because people are always like ready to run from a tiger, even though they don't feel like it. And the body's saying, I don't need to detox right now. I don't need to digest my food right now.
Yeah.
I don't need to worry about my hormones and my immune system right now. I've got to run from a tiger. So yeah, it's
amazing.
So fascinating how important our brain is and how we compartmentalized different systems in our body and forgotten that our brain is connected to all of them.
The brain's the driver, isn't it? It's, yeah. And I see like so many women, and I know this was the case for me as well, especially mums, but not just mums, that are really maladapted to the stress in their life. Or you say, you know, out of 10, how stressed are you? And they're like, oh, maybe a 4 or a 5. And their lives are hectic. But it's because, like, in comparison to other times and periods of their life, it's maybe not as busy or stressful, but it's still, you know, like as women in our modern 24/7 go lifestyle, it's inherently busy and stressful. And then
our society is creating a level of stress in our brains and nervous systems that has never been seen before. 100 years ago, life was so different.
Even 50. I mean, it's just so fast paced, isn't it? Like I look at my mum and my dad, but my mum as well. Like she's seen the advent of so many things, like when TV came in and then it went from black and white to color. And then we've got, well, records were around when she was born, but, you know, like then we shifted to CDs and digital stuff and, you know, how quickly have all the changes come in recent times with computers. And I was even laughing the other day because I was saying, we were at a cake stall and someone had handwritten the notes. And we were like, how lovely. You just don't really see that anymore because we all have printers or label makers and things like that. And I was like, oh, I remember you were the label maker. It's you with your hand.
And it's impossible to have time to yourself now that people used to have, because it used to be that maybe there wasn't a telephone.
Or you just took it off the hook.
You know,
when you got home from school, if you didn't want to talk to someone or you had a bad day, you took it off the hook, or you just said you didn't answer it or told your mum and dad that I don't want to talk to anyone tonight. Simple.
And now society expects you to be on call 24/7. They expect that they can get an answer to their email in 20 minutes.
Yes.
They expect you always to be on, and human beings are not meant to always be on. We're meant to be sitting on the prairie, looking at the stars, around a campfire.
Yeah.
You know, just in a calm environment. Like our current environments make us feel like we're running from a tiger all day.
Yeah, they do. And I often talk about how cumulative those little stressors are. Like, oh, you got a text and you think, oh, I didn't pay that bill, or I didn't give that consent form to school for the child, or whatever it might be. And that all adds up and keeps you in that hypervigilant state constantly. And we were just talking before we hit record about not listening to podcasts while we're walking and just tuning into nature and where we're at, and giving our brain that downtime and that time to daydream and, you know, move wherever it wants to. And I think that's really healing to our brains and our nervous systems, but also what's really lacking for us, because we always have to feel productive. And productive in our society is not resting, even though rest and relaxation, we've just talked about how important it is.
Yeah. And it's so important because although there are multiple causes of histamine intolerance and mast cell activation, from mold and candida and SIBO and gut dysbiosis and, heavy metals and all of these kinds of things, the real core root of everything is that we are not in rest, digest, and repair mode.
Yes.
The parasympathetic mode. Because if we're in that mode, our body knows what to do. And it's always trying to detox everything and clear stuff out and balance our hormones and do all the good work for us. But we as a society and as human beings that have been entrained to do everything for everyone else before ourselves have forgotten that. Like we've given that away, and so our body has forgotten how to do it. Like it's stuck in this fight flight, it's stuck, and it just needs that time.
Yes.
And It needs us to give it a chance to shift. Our body knows how to heal. We just have to guide it. We need to feed it the right nice foods, and we need to give it a little bit of supplementation here and there to get rid of some of the immediate stuff. But our body knows what to do.
It does. And I was just thinking while you were saying that, Luanne, because we are in that constant hypervigilant, rushing state, there's that disconnection between, say, heart and mind, just to simplify it. But the work that you do with the MAP and the brain rewiring, does that help? That helps build that connection back between, the body and the brain, and helping people tune into what their body needs?
Yes, it does. Although that is more what I would call brain-based or top-down. There's also bottom-up practices that you can use, and that I have a little bit in my program as well. And that's somatic awareness. So things that involve, like, I use Qigong, which is like a Tai Chi, and yoga. Also breathing tools and techniques, and then other forms of somatic awareness that you can do, like Feldenkrais or Somatics, things that allow you to notice what's going on in your body as well. Like, what's your posture like? Are your hands clenched? If they are, open your hands and put your shoulders back a little bit. Notice how you feel differently. So that's like the body to brain. Something really simple you can do is you smile. And when you smile, it actually changes the chemicals being produced in your brain, even if you don't want to smile. So
you can't help but smile now that you've said that.
You can't help but smile because I said smile. But it's like it will actually start to produce like serotonin and things like that, and produce less cortisol because of the smile. That's the somatic side, which is body to brain. And we kind of need to do a bit of both. So definitely movement is important. And gentle movement. A lot of my clients are doing like high intensity exercise, and that actually will fill up your histamine in your body, because your body will produce more cortisol, more adrenaline, which will then produce more histamine from the mast cells. And so, it's about relearning a little bit about our bodies, but taking away the fear, because a lot of times we're scanning our bodies with fear, and it's shifting to living in your body with more trust, like that trust of your body. And I use the MAP coaching a lot for that as well, because when you get that unwell, you view your body as being the enemy. And you don't feel safe in your home, and your body is your only home. And we need to be able to make ourselves feel safe in our home again. So that's a big part of it, is coming back to like safety within and creating that.
That's beautiful. That's really nice. And it's so true. So many people feel that disconnected, or just don't, wish I had a different body, or all of those things as well. So we've covered so much ground today. We started off with some symptoms and talking about what people might see, but like you've said, it is a big range of symptoms, and they sort of might be personal to each, or individual to each person. And so, given your toolkit there, and that you've got lots to draw from there to help people there as well, but could you give us a couple or a few tips or strategies that women, especially those women over 40, can implement to improve their histamine intolerance? I know we mentioned the 4-week diet plan. So they'll go to the show notes, they'll find that and download it. What could they do food-wise or drink, or what else would you suggest that could do, a couple of things that they could do at home to help alleviate symptoms while they get started on? So the easiest one is just reduce all those histamine foods, and then you can see where you're going. And you can grab my list and my 4-week meal plan, and you can take out swapping them for other foods, right? And a lot of the low histamine food is a little bit like, what did your great grandma used to eat? So you're kind of going a little bit more simple, and
The other things that you can do as well is think about leftovers, because leftovers increase in histamine.
Mm-hmm.
So you actually want to freeze any leftovers that contain meat, because those will increase in histamine if you leave them out. And a lot of us are so used to just putting the pot in the fridge and then having the rest for lunch tomorrow. But yeah, if you freeze them, and I always say the freezer is your friend, like batch cook meals, fill up the freezer, because then that takes away that stress of having to think of what I'm going to cook at 7:30 at night, and now I have to do something from scratch. You've got like your at-home takeouts.
Yeah, fake away.
Freezer is filled, fake away.
Yeah.
And so those are some real basic tips. The other ones are, making sure that you're looking at that stress in your life, and just going, okay, like, where am I saying yes when I want to say no?
Yes.
And just starting with the real basics there, like, can you introduce a little bit of me time where you can meditate for 10 minutes, or you can go for a walk in nature, preferably if there's a park nearby, and just get a bit of time where it's just you and nobody's asking anything of you. But just that short 10, 15, 20 minutes a day, if you can start doing that, then you can start giving your brain a little bit of breathing space.
Yeah.
And it all starts with like one simple change, and then you build another little change and another little change, and it's like little building blocks.
Yeah, I agree. Often people think, oh, I got to do like, change everything all at once, or it has to be these grand gestures that we do, but actually it's those small habits and stacking or building on those that make up to that big change for us over time and help our bodies to heal. And especially if you're feeling so unwell, the idea of making grand sweeping changes is even more, it's so overwhelming.
Yeah, it can be. And the important thing to really understand is it does take time to heal.
Yes.
Especially when you're feeling really uncomfortable, you want to be fixed ASAP.
Yeah.
But the honest truth is, if there was a pill that could fix it, we'd all be taking it.
Yes.
So the reality is it does take time. It takes time because mast cells, once they're activated, they live for a few years. And so you're looking at calming down the body so that as the body regenerates, like our cells in our body are constantly replenishing, our gut lining replenishes within just a few days, but we need to keep creating an environment so that our body is going to be healing, and it needs to be happening every day, and it needs to be happening over a period of time.
Yeah.
So, we can't kind of just snap our fingers and it's done. But just like the old Pantene commercial, I love that commercial. It won't happen overnight, but it will happen.
Will happen. Yes.
And, determination is the thing that got me through. I wholly and totally and completely believed that I could get there. And that's really what it is about.
That's massive to help keep yourself going, just with that subconscious thought, rather than it's hopeless, it's useless, it's never going to happen for me.
And it's easy to get in that state, but it's about really going, like, if you understand how the body and the brain are working, you can just really remind yourself, well, this is why I need to do this. Right? And you get back on the horse.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I know it feels really hard. I often have this conversation with my kids, or even with my husband, and they sometimes get quite incensed when I tell them that they actually have the opportunity to choose how they want to respond. No one's making you feel this way, or, it's all up to us. Sometimes it can feel like we're not in charge and not in control, and it can feel impossible to choose how we respond. But yeah, I guess we have the benefit of the study and knowledge behind us, that we know how powerful your brain is and your mind and your thoughts, and that sometimes you just got to get dogmatic in those thoughts around, loving on your body, or telling yourself that you can get better and you can feel well, until, fake it till you make it.
Yeah. And
same.
And not about toxic positivity, but about physically going, if I do this tool, it will change my brain, whether I believe it or not, whether, whatever, like it'll happen.
Yes.
And so knowing that there are ways to change things that maybe you thought were impossible to change.
Yes. Yeah.
And our capacity for life can increase and our resilience can increase, and we can approach things in such a calmer way than we used to. And I didn't used to be this calm.
Yeah, same.
But I'm calmer now.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I choose, I know how unwell I will feel if I am in that way. And I know when there's a lot going on, it can feel impossible and it's hard to get yourself up and out of that place. But I guess the message I want everyone to know is that it is possible, even when it feels really hopeless. And I think that's what you help your clients feel each and every day with the tools that you use with them, that there is hope and you can feel well again. And it isn't a life sentence as such. Histamine intolerance or MCAS is not a life sentence. You can enjoy food, lots of different foods, eat out without knowing where the toilets are.
You can,
all that sort of stuff.
You can. And as you gradually get little stepwise improvements, you can enjoy life more, and then you get more stepwise improvements. But I went from not being able to work and really being at rock bottom.
Yeah.
And now I'm eating avocados, I'm eating out, I'm working, I'm traveling again, I'm doing the things that I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I thought I would never get my life back. But now I've got a new life.
I remember when that was happening for you as well. So yeah, it is like a whole different person.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Luanne, for all that amazing information that you've shared with us today. And I'm sure people are feeling more hopeful or understanding maybe a bit more about what's going on for them. Before we finish up, is there anything that you want to add or let people know?
I think the main thing is, you don't have to stay on that diet forever. And if you're starting to notice that you're also excluding other dietary groups and you're reacting to more and more foods, get help before you end up on 5 foods like I did.
Yes, great advice.
Because I just don't want to see people getting to that state. And my goal is to keep people on as many foods as possible, because the food is not the problem.
That's right. There's something else, the why underneath there as well.
Yeah.
And I always think good advice is that if you're thinking of cutting foods out or cutting food groups out, then please do talk to a nutritionist or a naturopath, someone trained in that nutritional medicine that can help make sure your body's still receiving all the nutrients and nourishment that it needs. So yeah, thank you again, Luanne. It's been such a pleasure. And as I said, I'll put your info in the show notes so people can go and find your free download and find out more about you and histamine intolerance.
Yeah, I'd love that. I'm at happywithouthistamine.com.
It's really common for women over 40 to experience the chaos of changing hormones, mood, metabolism, and energy. But I hope you know now that common doesn't have to equal normal for you or them. You can help others understand they aren't alone in feeling this way, and that perimenopause doesn't have to be horrific, by subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing this podcast with other women in their 40s and beyond. Thanks so much for listening and sharing your time with me today in this Chaos to Calm conversation.